Political consultant Jay McCluskey is, depending on who you talk to, one of the most revered or feared people in state politics. He has the ear of Governor Susana Martinez and is fresh off running tough campaigns through his Reform New Mexico Now PAC against some of the state's legislature's biggest names. Here's NMIF producer Matt Grubbs.
Jay, thanks for coming in. We appreciate your time.
You bet.
So tell me, in this last election, on a state legislative level, where are you hanging your hat?
Well, I think overall, we're obviously, when you lose nationally, as Republicans did, and we have tough nights at the top of the ticket, that's going to translate down to down ballot races. So, we thought we had a shot at the House. We thought it was probably an outside shot given a presidential year, but we're happy that we won 3 state Senate seats in the state. We also knocked off 2 of the 3 Senate Democratic leaders, which we thought was a good night. And we're happy that looks like we defended 6 of the 8 Republican seats that we won in 2010. We also picked up a seat up in northwestern New Mexico.
Raby Gay seat.
Raby Gay seat was a previously Democrat seat. We also picked up a new seat from redistricting that was also a Democratic seat in the past with Monica Youngblood. So overall, it looks like we're going to be down 1 or down 2 in the House. And that's actually more Republican seats than we've ever had following a presidential election year since like 1967. So it's not as good as we would have liked. Obviously, we would have liked to have won control, but all things factored in, we're satisfied with the results.
As people sort of game out what happened in the election, of course, it's always difficult, but the criticism I hear most often, at least right now, is that you guys didn't play hard enough in the House. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I totally disagree.
Really?
I mean, I think we invested more in House races than has ever bbeen invested in the state on the Republican side by leaps and bounds. And so we fought really hard for the House. The Democrats did as well, and you got to give the other side credit. They won at the top of the ticket, and they were able to run a very effective turnout operation that carried their legislative candidates with them. You got to give the other side credit.
Sure. The lack of a straight party option, Republicans were, to my knowledge, really hoping that would give them 2, 3, 4 points, something like that. Did it give you the bump that you thought?
I don't think it translated at all. I think there was a lot of talk about that, and I was always cautious with people that that's a theory, that it was going to help us, and that didn't translate on Election Day at all that we could see. That was Democrats actually voted a pretty straight ticket without that option, and we didn't get nearly the crossover vote that we needed up and down the ticket.
What do you think happened in House 53 with Ricky Little? As people look at that district, I've heard a lot of them say, I just can't figure it out, because performance-wise, it would seem to lean toward you.
Yes, I think if you got to look at Doña Ana County as a whole, I think as from our perspective, from a Republican perspective, no Republican carried Doña Ana County. And that includes Steve Pierce, who won by 20 points district-wide. I believe Heather Wilson lost by 20 points. Mitt Romney lost big, and we did not have a single Republican carry that county. When you look at the Little race, I think there's a large Hispanic population there. I think this is a problem that we saw with the presidential race, where Republicans were underperforming with Hispanic voters, and I think that translated into that District 53 race. And so you're looking at a performance average that's, the last 10 years or so, and that district's been growing. And you had like Chaparral was in that district. There were very long lines in Chaparral, people voting, a high turnout there, and I think that the top of the ticket there was very Democrat, and that vote obviously cost Rick Little a seat.
Sure. As you look, let's step outside of the state level for a while. As you look at that Hispanic vote that you mentioned, that was something that George W. Bush did a great job of. He got those votes. He got what he needed. That's fallen off. John McCain and now here in 2012 with Mitt Romney. What's behind that?
I think Republicans have to do a better job getting the Hispanic vote. It's clear. George W. Bush did a good job and got 44% of the Hispanic vote, if you believe exit polling. It was obviously much higher than we've had, but he had a track record. And this is something, when he was a governor of Texas, he was he got a lot of Hispanic vote in Texas, and he was engaged with the community and committed to education reform. And that carried over when he was president, and both running for president and running for re-election. And I think the message there is Republican candidates, Republican office holders can't visit Hispanics during an election season and think they're going to win the vote. You have to be sincere enough and authentic enough as a party, as an elected official, as a candidate, to be engaged with the community. And that's where, the Republicans have not done a good enough job, obviously, and that's something that they're going to have to do better of.
I've heard often the criticism of people who say, quote, the Hispanic vote on either side as it's not necessarily this monolithic thing. They're responding to the same issues that many, many other people are, whether it's family values issues, economic issues, things like that. What would need to change in the Republican platform to appeal to those voters?
I don't know that it's necessarily a platform change. I think the party will always be defined, I think, by the candidates. And so we have to do a good job of recruiting candidates who are going to appeal to the Hispanic community overall, recruiting and electing more Hispanic candidates. And that's something Governor Martinez nationally was part of the Future Majority Project, which had a goal of recruiting 100 Hispanic candidates to run for office throughout the country. And you look at some of our pickup seats, as far as we have a Navajo woman who won House District 4 up there. Monica Youngblood is a Hispanic woman who won that other seat. And I think that's important for the party. It's good for the party, but it's good for the state overall. It's good for the community to have representation in both parties. And I think that's something that the candidates and the elected officials have to do a better job of.
Let's get back into the state now and talk about the Senate. You guys, when I say that, Reform New Mexico Now. You're running this PAC and played very hard in Senate 32 with Tim Jennings, where you had success, and in Senate 29 with Michael Sanchez, where you didn't. Let's start with Jennings, where you won. What made that work? Was it just the amount of money that was there?
No, I mean, if you look at it, Tim Jennings, I believe, spent $350,000 on his race. He had outside PAC assistance from the Democrats. I think what cost Senator Jennings, he was just out of step with his district. I mean, Cliff Pirtle better represented the district, and the issues highlighted that and demonstrated that. And I think that's what carried it. And also, there's always a lot of talk about what the PACs did or what outside groups did. Well, you had someone, like in Cliff Pirtle and Senator-elect Pirtle, who saying he was knocking doors every day. I mean, he met with a lot of voters, and so he had a lot to do with that victory. And I think what cost Senator Jennings was just being out of step with his constituents.
Sure, but if you just look at, knocking on doors, we wouldn't have spent, $6 billion in a presidential race, that sort of thing. I mean, money really does matter, and that's in fact why you guys formed that group, right?
Well, we clearly wanted to be able to communicate the message to the voters, and that's necessary. We even, Senator Jennings went on TV, and we obviously had to go on TV as well. We'd be foolish not to give him that medium.
Right.
And so I think that played a role, but it was his, at the end of the day, when you have that much resources on both sides, voters get a pretty clear message from each side. And at the end of the day, I think Jennings' positions on those issues is what cost him the seat.
And then the Michael Sanchez district, that was one where you look at the House, and Republicans had in House Districts 7 and 8, they held those districts, the David Chavez and then Alonzo Baldonado. But when you play that out to Senate, 10-point victory for Michael Sanchez.
Yeah, and it's not the Senate district isn't exact overlap.
Sure.
That district got more Democrat during redistricting, but at the end of the day, Senator Sanchez was able to carry it. It's I think he benefited from having the top of the ticket, but at the end of the day, he was able to convince the voters in that district to reelect him, and that's the election.
We talked to him on election night, and he mentioned actually your name to Gene. And his criticism was, he said, the guys like Jay McCleskey are out there creating issues for elections. This is not an agenda for Governor Martinez. So I don't really see what her agenda is, what she wants to do, other than pick issues that we oppose and then pick us off in the next election. Talk about that.
I totally disagree with him. Take the issue of ensuring children can read by the 3rd grade or social promotion. That is an issue where Governor Martinez and President Obama's administration are in agreement on that issue. It's an issue that the Albuquerque Journal found that 75% of New Mexicans are in agreement on that issue. It passed the House with broad bipartisan support and passed Senate committees with broad bipartisan support. And Senator Sanchez chose not to call that bill up to let it to pass, to allow it to have an up or down vote. Now, that was a big issue during the campaign. And so the issues we brought up during the campaign to suggest that children reading by 3rd grade isn't an important issue, I disagree with. I mean, we obviously had disagreements on that issue, and that's what the campaign was had around.
picked issues in social promotion, in the driver's license issue that, as you said, there's heavy support for them. But is that support shallow? Do people care enough about that stuff to get to the polls? Is that what you saw in District 29, that people are like, yeah, social promotion, but I just don't buy into it. I know Michael Sanchez, he's my guy.
No, I think there are a lot of issues that factor into what happens at the polls on Election Day, especially in a presidential election year. I would bet that when you look at the canvass numbers within that district, that Michael Sanchez was underperforming much of the Democratic ticket. And so I think there was a lot of crossover vote that happened on that issue. And you can see whether it's taxes and spending, whether it's the driver's license issue, whether it's education reform, I do think those issues matter to voters.
The agenda that the governor will have come January, is it going to look similar to what we've seen? Is she going to keep knocking on the same doors as far as social promotion and that?
I think she's going to work hard still on education reform, on job creation, and whether that's tax reform or job training or tying education into some of the job creation measures. But she's right now reaching out to Democratic legislators and crafting a lot of that agenda to be as bipartisan as possible. And I think you'll see a lot of her commitment to education reform will certainly be there. Her commitment to job creation will certainly be there. But you have a split government now, and you're going to, just as we did before, and I think you're going to see her working across the aisle quite a bit, as she's done in the past. You saw with the budget. We've had budget fights. You see it nationally. You see it in other states. In New Mexico, we've been able to pass budgets with broad bipartisan support that, both sides have to compromise, but at the end, New Mexicans win.
Sure. When you say she's reaching out to other people, it's a great soundbite and it sounds good, but what does it mean? I mean, has she made a phone call to Michael Sanchez?
I don't know.
Would he even take that call?
No, I mean, she's always reached out to Michael Sanchez. She's reaching out to Democrat legislators, to the leadership on various issues and working to craft. I know she was speaking with Senator Wirth, for example, who's definitely on the left side of the political spectrum on issues like taxes and how they can work together on tax reform to put together a package.
The Senate Bill 9 stuff that happened last session.
Senate Bill 9 and various issues and how things can get wrapped into a larger overall tax reform. So she's always been willing to and able to and successfully reached across the aisle. You look at the social promotion bill, for example, that was sponsored by a Democrat in the House and a Democrat in the Senate. And so these have been, many of her agenda items have been carried by Democrats. It'd be very difficult to say they're partisan.
You look at people who carried some of her bills, the driver's license bill in the House, that was an Andy Nunez bill. Some people said it was an Andy Nunez bill before it was the Susana Martinez bill. All the same, you tried to get a Republican into that seat. Was that just a numbers game? Was there something else going on?
No, I mean, I think Andy Nunez, when he chose to run as an independent, and not in either party, he basically sealed his political fate. The reality is he was not going to win that district as an independent. He was never in a position to win that district. It was either going to be won by a Democrat or a Republican. And so we obviously backed the Republican to win that race.
When Susana Martinez runs for re-election, presuming she runs for re-election, it's always up to her, what's she going to run on? What's the message voters are going to hear?
Well, I think you'll hear that she did what she said she was going to do, and that's what she's continuing to do. There is nothing in her agenda right now that she's pushing or advocating or something she's done before that she did not campaign on. She was very honest and clear with voters about what she intended to do while in office, and she's done that, and she's carried that out. And that doesn't mean she's gotten everything she's wanted to get done through the legislature, but she's always advocated that and been very straight with voters.
As you look at the economy and jobs, that's the one weak spot. It was for the president. It is for her because she's the governor right now, and she's got to do something. What is she going to do? Are there any specific measures out there?
Well, I think what you saw last session with what she did working on tax reforms, getting rid of the tax pyramiding or the double and triple taxation of goods and services, especially with in the construction industry to try to jumpstart the economy. She was trying to remove taxes from some of the 30,000 small businesses and really helping small businesses. She's also looking at infrastructure projects. You see the Paseo del Norte I-25 interchange that was approved by the voters. That's something she was very strong on, not just for the jobs that it creates building the interchange, but also how that infrastructure helps the economy and small businesses. Also, she's also working on job training and what we can do to help with job training efforts, as well as education reform and tying those into job creation and helping small businesses that way. And I think you're going to see this session a strong focus on job creation measures.
Jay, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.